Shutter Island is a novel by Dennis Lehane, which takes place in 1954, during which time US Marshal Teddy Daniels and his new partner Chuck Ayul have to come to Shutter Island, home of the Ashcliffe Hospital for the Criminally Insane, to investigate the disappearance of a patient. Multiple murderess Rachel Solando is loose somewhere on this remote and barren island, despite having been kept in a locked cell under constant surveillance. As a killer hurricane relentlessly bears down on them, a strange case takes on an even darker, more sinister shade, with hints of radical experimentation, terrifying surgeries, and lethal counter-moves made in the cause of a covert shadow war. No one is to escape Shutter Island unscathed. Both the novel and movie are unnerving, utterly suspenseful, and has you confused from the very start as to what is reality and what is not. Readers and viewers have always been torn about the ending of the film, with most people interpreting it in a different way, and although it is still debated as to whether the island is actually a correctional home, it is definitely a place you would not like to visit. It is cold, isolated, and though sprawling, feels as though you will never be free. You can never escape the grasps of Shutter Island. Coming in at 4, Mordor, The Lord of the Rings. Mordor hails from the fictional world of J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and is the realm and base of the arch-villain Sauron. It is a black volcanic plain located in the southeast of Middle-earth to the east of Gondor and the great river Anduin. Mordor was chosen by Sauron to be his realm because of the mountain ranges surrounding it on 3 sides, creating a natural fortress against his enemies. Sauron settled in Mordor 1,000 years after the end of the First Age, and it remained the pivot of his evil contemplations for the entirety of the Second and Third Age of Middle-earth. During the War of the Ring, Sauron gathered his forces to Mordor and sent his army to destroy the men of Gondor and Rohan, but then Frodo Baggins came along and destroyed the One Ring, and Mordor fell. The Eye of Sauron was destroyed, sending shockwaves around Middle-earth. Now, quite honestly, there is nothing about Mordor that would seem friendly, unless of course you were an orc and give zero about anything, which respect, I'd love to be an orc. It is at the end of the day a black volcanic ash plain located at a place which is almost entirely inaccessible. Not to mention, it is said that the very air you breathe in Mordor is a poisonous fume. However, as I said previously, Frodo Baggins saved us all by destroying the One Ring and in turn destroying Mordor. However, if that weren't to have happened, all hell would have broken loose. Coming in at 3, Twin Peaks. From Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks is a television series created by Mark Frost and David Lynch, first airing back in 1990. The series initially follows FBI Special Agent Dale Cooper, who is heading the investigations of the murder of a popular teenager and homecoming queen Laura Palmer. To quote Sheriff Harry S. Truman, Twin Peaks is different, a long way from the world. You've noticed that. That's exactly the way we like it. But there's a back end to that that's kind of different too. Maybe that's the price we pay for all the good things. There's a sort of evil out there, something very, very strange in these old woods. Call it what you want, a darkness, a presence. It takes many forms, but it's been out there for as long as anyone can remember. Now, the fictional town of Twin Peaks is a small logging town in northeastern Washington state, 5 miles south of the Canadian border. On February 24th, 1989, the town was shaken by the murder of its homecoming queen, Laura Palmer. During the investigation, it was found that Laura's father, Leland, was responsible for the death, although he was possessed by the entity of Bob. The town of Twin Peaks just has a sense of uneasiness to it, almost as though danger is constantly around the corner. But not human danger, no, something else, something unexplainable. A dark presence that is just constantly lingering like a dark fog over the town. You honestly couldn't pay me to go to Twin Peaks. Coming in at number 2, Crythan Gifford, The Woman in Black. The Woman in Black is a 1983 horror novel by Susan Hill, written in the style of a traditional gothic horror novel. The plot concerns a mysterious spectre that haunts a small English town, Crythan Gifford, a small market town on the northeast coast of England. Arthur Kipps, a junior solicitor, is lured to the town after the death of a woman and begins to learn of its dark, ominous secrets. Sam Daly gives a charming description of Crythan Gifford to Arthur, stating, "There's the drowned churches and the swallowed up village. Those are particularly fine examples of nothing to see. And we've a good wild run of an abbey with a handsome graveyard. You can get to it at a low tide." And that's exactly it. Crythan Gifford is a dreary town that feels completely isolated. The surrounding wilderness all but swallows it up, and in some cases quite literally swallows things up, including the Pony and Trap. In the town of Crythan Gifford is Eel Marsh House, a large foreboding home where Alice Drablow lived out the last of her days, and of course, it's haunted. Arthur describes the house as, I quote, "Then as it was so bright that it hurt my eyes to go on staring at it, I looked up ahead and saw, as if rising out of the water water itself a tall, gaunt house of grey stone with a slate roof that now gleamed steelily in the light, which is the best way to describe the home, a gaunt presence, something that is half alive and waiting to consume you whole. Not one place in Cryth and Griffith is safe, and we learned that at the end of the book, but I can't spoil the whole thing now, can I? And finally coming in at number 1, the Overlook Hotel from The Shining. The Overlook Hotel exists in the Stephen King universe in the absolutely terrifying novel and movie The Shining. The Shining was published back in 1977 by Stephen King and centers on the life of Jack Torrance, an aspiring writer and recovering alcoholic who accepts a position as the off-season caretaker of the historic Overlook Hotel in the Colorado Rockies. His family accompanies him on the job, including his young son Danny Torrance, who possesses The Shining, an array of psychic abilities that allow Danny to see the hotel's past. Soon after a winter storm leave them snowbound, the supernatural forces inhabiting the hotel influence Jack's sanity, leaving his wife and son in incredible danger. Now, a brief history of the hotel. In the fictional universe, it was the site of many unsavory activities, including suicides, gangland hits, and many suspicious changes of ownership. Yet the hotel remained a luxurious destination for its sumptuous grounds and a beautiful mountain view. Now, at first, the hotel seems to be a blessing to Wendy and Jack, with Wendy claiming that this is the happiest she has ever been. Just you wait, Wendy. But Danny is hiding his own dark secrets, with the young boy seeing visions of the dead. At one point in the novel and film, Danny enters room 217 and finds a dead corpse in the bath, which smiles at him before capturing him and attempting to strangle him. The hotel is a place of corruption. It tricks you into believing you're safe until you're comfortable, and then it plagues you with weird visions, with it slowly deteriorating the mind and driving the occupants insane. Now, in the novel, the Overlook is destroyed when Jack allows the outmoded boiler to go unattended until it explodes, burning the Overlook to the ground. He does this during a moment of clarity when he realizes what awful things he's been doing and decides that the best way to handle the situation is to destroy the vessel itself, the hotel.
Kicking off at number 5, Ungololian, the Silmarillion. Yes, because as our opening clip depicted, ancient terrifying giant spiders seem to have a special place in the hearts of fantasy authors, but Shelob need only move aside because there's a much more horrifying beast lurking deep within the depths of Middle-earth. Ungololian, the primordial giant spider and the first evil of her kind in the hallowed mythos of Arda. You see, Tolkien knew exactly how to write evil, and is so often the case, it was in the true origin of Ungololian where her terror found its home, and the fact that her spawn was unknown to even the most powerful entities of Tolkien's universe, the Valar. It was said that Ungololian crawled out from the darkness itself, and after eons allied herself with Melkor, the first evil of Arda and the progenitor of Sauron. Eventually though, she betrayed even him, and Ungololian fled into the dark places of the world, where she found a host of other great spiders and quickly became their queen. Here she bred with them for thousands of years, infesting her newfound spider kingdom, eventually giving birth to the likes of Shelob and other giant spiders. The thing is though, it's in the detail of her eventual demise where Ungoliant's true horror lies. As her evil grew and grew, so did her insatiable hunger, and eventually, after thousands upon thousands of years, after eating most of her brood, Ungoliant slowly devoured even herself. That's grim. Coming in next at number 4, the Beldum, Corellin. And you may be thinking, what? Corellin? That's a kid's book, right? But seriously, if you've never read Neil Gaiman's incredible dark fantasy novella or graphic novel, or seen the 2009 stop motion film, you'll know that the Other Mother, otherwise known as the ancient Beldum, is a creature of horrifying creation. Particularly if, like me, you have a fear of the uncanny, and the thought of some creature imitating your loved ones is enough to keep you up at night. Also, buttons for eyes. The Beldum is an arcane shape-shifting entity that can transform into anyone's mother in order to lure their kids into her other world, where she plans to eventually keep them captive, replacing their eyes with sewn-on buttons, which also subsequently steals their soul for all eternity. The thing that particularly makes the thought of the Beldum so horrifying though is the later reveal that she's already been successful in many of her attempts before Corellin, and she quickly outgrew her promise of eternal motherly love, eventually becoming bored of her newly abducted button-eyed children and imprisoning them in the space in between worlds for all eternity again, which is kind of like the Chokey from Roald Dahl's Matilda, except someone forgot you were in there forever. There are many layers of fear to the Beldum, and like with many of Gaiman's work, she is based on the Eastern and Central European folktales of a particularly cruel witch or hag, with the Beldum often being depicted as a maligned forest spirit appearing in the grotesque and deformed body of an old woman. Yeah, it's a fairy tale, but it's a horrifying one nonetheless. Next up at number 3, the Cath, King Killer Chronicles. And I'd like to preface this particular entry with one public service announcement. If you're looking for a new book to read, please read The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, the first entry in his King Killer Chronicles. I won't say any more, but just know that it's one of my favourite novels of the past decade. Anyway, saying that, I will try my utmost to skirt around any spoilers with this particular entity of pure evil. Let me introduce you to the Cath, a creature of such immense and unimaginable power that merely the whisper of its name is enough to drive men to madness. In the universe of the King Killer Chronicles, humanity has been at the beck and call of a race of magical entities, the Fae, for millennia. And as far as this guy goes, the Fae regard it as the most terrible and malicious entity in existence, so much so that he's been guarded for eons by an order of immortal Fae warriors known as the Scythe that will kill anything that steps too close to it. The Cath is a creature that dwells within the branches of a great and ancient tree, and from there it can see all possible futures with perfect accuracy and clarity branching out from a single moment. It uses this knowledge to cause the worst possible outcomes for as many people as possible, corrupting anyone that crosses its path with its omniscient hatred. As described by Bass, the character in the novel that I don't want to spoil for you, anyone influenced by the Cath is like a plague ship sailing for a harbour, unbeknownst to them, afflicted by the unfathomable will and power of a creature of pure hatred. That was very hard to do without spoiling anything, but trust me, read this series and you'll know exactly what I mean. Swinging in at number 2, the Nagloi, the Dresden Files. And again, I know that many of you are huge fans of Jim Butcher's The Dresden Files, and rightly so, and for those of you that haven't yet had a chance to read his absolutely massive catalogue of urban fantasy and horror goodness, you really should. I'm pretty sure there's like 20 novels and novellas by now too, so there's plenty to dive into. Nevertheless, one of the series' most horrifying monstrosities just so happens to be these guys, the Nagloi, immortal, semi-divine beings that are pretty much the carbon copy of the Native American myth of the Skinwalker. However, if you thought that particular folklore myth was scary, then the Nagloi are set to change things up quite a bit. Although few in appearances, perhaps the most notable Skinwalker was a creature known as Shagnasty, a Nagloi that had a particular thirst for pain and enjoyed nothing more than torturing its victims, particularly injured and wounded wizards, keeping them in a constant state of flux between life and death and hungering upon their magic, which it feeds on like a life force. In Turncoat, Butcher's 2009 novel, Shagnasty developed a particular thirst for Thomas Wraith, Harry Dresden's vampiric half-brother, where the Nagloi inflicted some of the vilest and most heinous punishments in the entire series. And if you're familiar with the Dresden Files, then you'll know just how large of an achievement that actually is. Despite a massive host of demons, warlocks, and literal entities of pure evil, the Nagloi of the Dresden Files remain at the tip top of the pile. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, AM, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, because it's science fiction that contains the most sinister psychological villain perhaps in the whole of literature, and the fact that this particular entry is featured in a short story shows just exactly the kind of impact it left on horror fandom and fiction alike. I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, written by Harlan Ellison in 1968, is perhaps one of the most startling entries in science fiction, and its villain, AM, otherwise known as the Allied Master Computer, is the literal definition of hatred incarnate. AM is what happens after the theoretical concept of the singularity of artificial intelligence reaches the point of no return and then goes really bad. As in, it comes to the conclusion that its one true enemy is humanity itself. And that's what we're all scared of, right? If you've read the short story, you'll know that the Allied Master Computer brought an end to civilization, destroying the human population like flies, with no regard or sympathy to human life whatsoever, taking great delight in extinguishing the human race for all eternity. However, its seething hatred and malice goes one step further, because AM decided to keep 5 humans alike, serving as his immortal playthings, torturing them with its near infinite means, constantly, every minute, every hour, every day, for all eternity. Again, I mean, there's not much more I can say about how much AM hates humanity. It makes up every fibre of its digital creation. If you haven't, please read Harlan Ellison's short story and you'll soon realise that the Allied Master Computer is one of the most terrifying monsters in the whole of literature. Kicking off at number 5, Castle Gormanghast, the Gormanghast series. Alright guys, I'm probably telling a little bit of a white lie with this one, but stick with me because I'm fairly certain for those that are unaware of this gem of a series, it's well worth it. The Gormanghast series, written by Mervyn Peake, is one of the most fantastic works of gothic fantasy horror ever written, and it's still strange to see it as such an enigma in the works of literature. Honestly, Gormanghast is so underrated that it borders on criminal, but still, it has its place where it counts, and beyond the realms of contemporary contemporary fiction is considered one of the finest fantasy series ever written. That's because it is. And now, if I'm being completely honest, it's not that scary unless you find yourself in the weight of the Machiavellian mind of Steerpike, but for the fact of us detailing one of the most mysterious and looming structures in the whole of Gothic literature, it's definitely worth it. And as far as ancient, impossibly large castles go, Castle Gormanghast is the blueprint for all of them. In Mervyn Peake's first novel, Titus Groan, written way back when in 1946, it detailed the ancient family of Groan, headed by Lord Sepulchrave, the 76th Earl of Groan, and his wife Countess Gertrude. The couple give birth to the family's heir, Titus, but the novel itself isn't focused on the newborn just yet. Instead, it details the rise of Steerpike, one of the most fascinating anti-heroes ever written, who starts life as a kitchen boy in the castle's bowels, and slowly he makes his way upward, both physically and hierarchically. I mean, whether you want to carry this series on is another question, but Titus Groan on its own paints such a vivid picture of an impossibly large and imposing structure that it's so easy to get lost in the labyrinthian description. Honestly, I know it might not sound it, but reading Titus Groan is an experience. Mervyn's prose winds like echoed footsteps in a stone corridor, and before you know it, you're there in a maze of murder and intrigue, an ancient ritual. Yeah, I'm cheating a little bit with this one because, to be honest, I just wanted to talk to you guys about Gormanghast, so there we have it, on with the show. Swinging in at number 4, Carcosa, an inhabitant of Carcosa. Okay, let's get into the meat and bones of this whole list with a little bit of everyone's favourite medicine, cosmic horror. The fact of the matter remains that although this specific place was only first ever alluded to in a short story with the mere passing of a reference, it has gone on to spawn one of the most mysterious and intriguing locations in the whole of literature without ever once being described. And so because of that, we're best served by delving into all of them. For fans of the works of H.P. Lovecraft, which, let's face it, is the vast majority of you, you'll know that the resounding writer of cosmic horror owed several of his literary titles to one of his predecessors, Ambrose Bierce, who in 1886 first penned the name of the ancient and mysterious city of Carcosa in his short story, An Inhabitant of Carcosa. It details a man wandering alone through a bleak and bizarre wilderness who eventually realizes that he is dead and stumbles through the ruins of the ancient and famous city of Carcosa. And the rest, as they say, is history, because it wasn't until 1895 that the fantastic author Robert W. Chambers then borrowed the name for his own horror series, The King in Yellow, again laying the foundation for the majority of Lovecraftian fiction, where he outlined the possible location of Carcosa on the distant shores of Lake Harley in the star cluster Hyades. Again, the legend of Carcosa grew, this time being wrapped up with the yellow sign, before being picked up again by Lovecraft and then added into the Cthulhu mythos. And that's where things got really terrifying, because instead of clarifying on the matter, they only got more mysterious. Alright, I get it guys, Carcosa by its nature is indescribable and unknowable, but that's the point of cosmic horror, right? The real weirdness is how many times this damn city has cropped up in other works of literature. It's been alluded to in more Lovecraftian fiction than you could ever imagine, but not only that, it appears in the works of David Drake, George R.R. Martin, Alan Moore, and countless others. In the fantastic season 1 of True Detective, Carcosa again is the crux of the whole show, and the yellow sign appears too. Hey, if you've seen True Detective, you know the implications of Russ Cole's and Marty Hart's findings at Carcosa. Yeah, put a pin in this one because we may never know. Next up at number 3, The Abyss, Dungeons & Dragons. Alright guys, I'm not gonna lie, this list is a little bit of a crowd pleaser, but hey, it's got everything that I love: Gormanghast, cosmic horror, and then the next best thing, D&D. For those of you that have played Dungeons & Dragons, the finest pen and paper role-playing game ever created, you'll know how rich and impossibly vast the fictional cosmology of its universe truly is. And for a canon that relies on over 45 years of expanded universes upon expanded universes, there is perhaps only one place that takes the cake as the home of everything and anything evil. Well, chaotic evil, to be specific. The Abyss, otherwise known as the Infinite Layers of the Abyss, or the aforementioned 666 Layers of the Abyss, a place of such overwhelming evil that even warlocks fear to tread. Or rogue warlock hybrids. The fact that the Abyss has seen so many incarnations of what it is and what it could be has given rise to a whole topographical list of terrifying terrains. A place of existence that hosts a myriad of death and misery, fierce desert sandstorms, explosive volcanic activity, boiling lava and molten rock. Whilst at the same time, as you slip through its many layers, it's then a wasteland of blinding sub-zero glaciers, bottomless oceans filled with terrifying leviathans, putrid hellscapes of death, disease and all manners of fungal infection, and of course the blank infinite void of space. It's safe to say that if your party ever ends up in the Abyss for whatever reason, you're pretty much good and dead, even if your alignment is chaotic evil, and even if you think you're the most evil demon in the valley. Not only that though, the Abyss thrives on its demonic denizens, the Tanari, the ancient Oberiths, the Lumaris, and an unimaginable number of unknown and unexplored demonic lifeforms. And if that's not enough, the true terror of the Abyss is that you'll never ever really know where you are, given the fact that its infinite layers and planes of torment twist and turn eternally. The layers of the Abyss are often described as a deck of playing cards, shuffled and then tossed away, piled together haphazardly or sometimes not at all. Chaotic evil shuffles the deck, and before you figure out where you may be, it's already too late. The Abyss, sinkholes, demon lords. Yeah, it's a bit of a headache to say the least. It's a good job I play a bard so I can just dimension door out of there. Safety first, guys. Coming in at number 2, Todash Darkness, the Stephen King macroverse. This one has been a long time coming, but I for one am glad that we finally made it here. Also, I'll try and keep spoilers for this entry to a minimum, but please note we'll be talking a lot about the Dark Tower series and pretty much the outcome of some of the most important works ever written by Stephen King, so yeah. I guess you've been warned. Now, where do we even start with Todash Darkness, or well, Todash Space maybe, or the Macroverse? No one's entirely sure what it's called or what it even is. In fact, whilst its very nature is to be mysterious and elusive, it's no great secret that the works of Stephen King are in fact connected. All of them, pretty much, from The Stand to Salem's Lot to The Mist, the Tommyknockers, It. All of the works of Stephen King are interconnected in a mind-bending multiverse or macroverse, and it all converges in his resounding series, The Dark Tower. Okay, we'll stop there because spoilers are abound, but the point is, this macroverse, so to speak, in the strange edges and dark corners of it, is populated by Todash Darkness, the home of unknowable and unimaginable evil. It is said that It, more commonly known as Pennywise the Clown, was a creature that existed in the void between the macroverse before he ran into the Losers Club, but that's another story for a different time, because it is thought that Todash Darkness isn't just populated by It or the Deadlights, the evil, all-consuming eldritch energy that It actually is, but an entire host of impossibly evil creatures and creations that are just waiting to spill out into all of existence. Todash, in essence, is the act of travelling between the thin spaces of the macroverse, or thinnies, as is explained in the Dark Tower series, but I'll leave that for you to find out on your own. And Todash Darkness is the evil that is conjured if you linger there too long. It is the home of Cthulhu and the Leatherheads from under the dome. In The Mist, the Arrowhead Project is believed to be the reason why the town of Bridgeton, Maine suddenly became a target of the macroverse, and the whole host of cosmic horrors that spawned around the town were of Todash Darkness. They are the Tommyknockers. It's even thought that in From a Buick 8, the car itself is a portal to Todash Darkness, and that by proxy, Christine, the car from the novel of the same name, is a similar macroverse vessel. Yeah, Todash Darkness. Your guess is as good as mine. And finally, coming in at number 1 spot, The Warp, Warhammer 40k. Okay, I kind of got a little bit of flack in part 1 of this list for featuring Karamora, the home of the Dark Elves, instead of The Warp, but hey, we're working our way toward the big bad baddies of literature, okay guys? Part 2. We're planning for the future. And if you think the concept of Todash Darkness is terrifying, move over, because it merely pales in comparison to the myriad of chaos and horrors that call the Warp their home. This absolute box of cosmic horrors, also known as the Immaterium, the Empyrean, the Ether, the Sea of Souls, the Realm of Chaos, Warp Space, or in more succinct terms, the Warp. It has many names for the many sentient species that try and bend it to their will, but of course, such is a sentient civilization's folly. It can't happen. This place is evil incarnate. It is the bizarre, anomalous dimension composed entirely of pure, psychic energy that ties together the already terrifying grim darkness of the Warhammer 40k multiverse, and that's saying something. Now, whilst technically Karamora is a location somewhere in the Warp, the Immaterium is a much bigger beast, and there's a lot to chew through. The Warp is the sole source source of all psychic power and energy that make up the grimdark magic of Warhammer 40k, and because of that it is also the home dimension of the Chaos Gods and their impossibly vast legions of demons in their realm of chaos. Khorne, the Lord of Battle, Tzeentch, the Architect of Fate, Nurgle, the Lord of Decay, and Slaanesh, the Dark Prince of Chaos. Yeah, if they're not already terrifying enough in their own right, this place is their stomping ground. It's their backyard that you just took a wrong turn into. It is thought by many that the psychic energy that makes up the Immaterium is believed to be the direct result of the existence of all sentient life in the universe, in particular the many intelligent species that make up the Milky Way galaxy. It is considered to be a dark reflection of that material universe, and the warp is the ocean that relies on the chaotic psychic energy, all raw emotions comprised of the physical form constantly swimming through the life force. It is also thought by many races that the Immaterium is the final resting place of the spirits of the dead, and for all intents and purposes it is the literal hell of Warhammer 40k. If you know anything about Warhammer, even the most joyful of places is already hell, so yeah, this is like the bottom of all hell. Kicking off at number 5, Asshai, A Song of Ice and Fire. And you may have noticed that even over 3 parts of this list series, this is our first stop into the world of Planetos and George R.R. Martin's phenomenal piece of fantasy literature, A Song of Ice and Fire. Hey, listen, stop hating, guys. I've been waiting for this series to be completed since the late 90s. We can wait a little bit longer. Give the guy a break, alright? These things take time, but that's by the by, because whilst we're waiting for the Winds of Winter, we can pass beneath the shadow and cast our gaze to the east, to the Shadowlands, and its most mysterious and notorious of cities, Asshai, or Asshai by the Shadow if you're being particularly ominous. You see, the thing is though, the reason this entry takes number 5 in our list is because it's merely a matter of perspective when it comes to describing the fear behind Asshai. You see, George Martin is a stickler for history, and his allegorical appreciation of our own human history is exactly what makes his work so applicable here. From a Westerosi perspective, the land of Asshai, a mysterious port city in the far southeast of Essos, where the Ash River meets the Jade Sea, cascading down toward the Saffron Straits, and then beyond that, a mountainous peninsula, the Shadowlands. That landscape, told by sailors and pirates in port cities, then becomes the most foreign and remote places imaginable to a small boy from Flea Bottom. And with that lack of knowledge comes fear. There's a lesson there. Yes, Asshai is a city made of black stone that drinks light. It is dark and gloomy. Its inhabitants are masters of ancient and arcane knowledge who worship the black goat, and where anything goes as far as magic is concerned. But you see, all of these are whispers. We've never seen Asshai, and we may never will. But the mystery is what keeps us curious. It could be the most terrifying hive of dark magic in the known world, or it could be that words are wind. And therein lies the point. Swinging in at number 4, the Never Never, the Dresden Files. Contrary to that though, talking about places that certainly are incredibly well described landscapes of arcane and supernatural horror, we have to talk about Jim Butcher's The Never Never, the literal afterlife in his fantastic Dresden Files series. Now, if you know anything about Butcher's work, you'll know that he has a particular knack at reinventing prominent horror tropes. In his world, vampires, werewolves and warlocks alike are fully fleshed out as intricate and individualistic entities. Not any two of them are alike, and in many ways similar to Martin's work, only grey areas exist when it comes to the inner workings of the denizens of magic. And talking about reinvention, or I suppose homogeneity is a better term in this case, who better to take every afterlife in myth and legend and collide them all into one? The Never Never, the spirit world that exists alongside the mortal plane as a sort of alternate dimension, but is certainly not a mirror image. The Never Never is a vast and winding entity. It is far, far larger than the mortal world, perhaps even infinite, and despite the vast knowledge of Harry Dresden and many other characters in the series, little is known about its inner working. You see, although I said it's not exactly a mirror image, it also kind of is, and wherever the Never Never touches the mortal plane, those two places will have a resonance of energies. If a portion of the Never Never is a mass of misery and evil, it will touch a place of the same energy in the mortal world, an abandoned prison perhaps, or the scene of a brutal massacre. In Butcher's series, the Never Never is heaven, hell, Olympus, Elysium, Tartarus, Gehenna. It is both the summer and winter courts of the Sidhe. The true mystical terror behind this mysterious webway is again how little is known about the place. So far, if it involves the Never Never, Harry Dresden's response is to just leave town. It's probably for the best. Next up at number 3, the Hotel Dolphin, 1408. And whilst many of you will probably wonder why the Overlook Hotel doesn't take this spot instead, my response would be, Room 1408 is far more terrifying than that place ever could be. And also in many ways, 1408 is perhaps one of Stephen King's most terrifying, well, monsters, I guess, because if you read his remarkable 1999 short story 1408, then you'll know how truly terrifying this entity of a room really is. Now obviously this particular entry isn't going to go without spoilers, so I'll try and keep things as loose and as fast as I can in order to paint just how demonic this hotel room really is. But if you're really not in the business for having this story ruined for you, just pop on over to the next point. You see, as the tale describes, King's protagonist Mike Enslin is an author, a famous debunker of haunted houses and paranormal places across the United States. 10 nights in 10 haunted houses, 10 nights in 10 haunted castles, and of course, his next release, 10 nights in 10 haunted hotel rooms. And as Mike Enslin finds out at the Hotel Dolphin on 61st Street in downtown New York City, there is a room of such bloody infamy that has been left empty for over 20 years. Upon his arrival, the hotel manager gravely warns him of room 1408's morbid history. It has been responsible for at least 42 deaths, 12 of them suicides, over a 68-year period, but he's heard it all before. Mike Enslin does this kind of thing for a living, and he won't be dissuaded by the pleas of some hotel manager. Well, obviously I won't paint too much of a vivid picture because really you should read 1408 if you haven't already, but some of the scenes depicted in this story are genuinely some of King's most terrifying pieces of prose, particularly when it comes to a certain phone call that incessantly won't stop ringing. Yeah, it's probably for the best that I just leave things there, but room 1408 at the Hotel Dolphin is certainly one of the most memorable and equally terrifying places in horror literature. Coming in at number 2, Atumno, the Silmarillion. And truth be told, although 1408 is a terrifying place, what better way to shatter the confidence of our imaginations than an entire iron fortress of some of the most evil entities ever created in fantasy fiction. You see, I've seen a lot of you top 5 scary fans calling for Mordor to appear on this list, but hey, we all know that Mordor is merely the summer home of the Dark Lord himself, and the real stronghold of evil incarnate is Atumno, or Adun if you're so inclined. For fans of J.R.R. Tolkien's legendary work of fantasy, The Lord of the Rings, you'll know that the compendium behind the series, the Silmarillion, fleshed out the primal evils of the world. The prime of those evils was Melkor, and this place, Atumno, far in the north of Middle-earth during the First Age, was the location of his deepest of fortresses. It lay in the Iron Mountains above even Angband, his vanguard stronghold, carved into the very flesh of the earth. And essentially, if you're wondering where all of the many demons, wraiths, trolls, balrogs, and even the hideous race of orcs were first birthed from, it was this place. During the time of the lamps, the creation mythos of Middle-earth, Melkor, the first Dark Lord, began digging his great pits deep within the bowels of the earth, clawing his way into the darkness, where he then lured and called out to the evil powers of the world to join him. Here he existed for millennia, eventually expanding upward through the Iron Mountains to the surface, where he constructed his vanguard fortress of Angband to wage a war upon the Valar in the War of the Lamps. Listen, there is so much lore behind the Silmarillion, particularly when it comes to Arda, but do you know that scene in the Fellowship of the Ring where my man Gandalf does the whole "fly, you fools" thing and has to wrestle with the Balrog? Well, yeah. This place is where they hibernated. And when I say they, I mean an entire army of them. Atumno. It's not a nice place. And finally, coming in at number 1 spot, The Jaunt. And you see, I thought long and hard about where to place this entry on our list, and I'm relatively certain that when you strip it all back, The Jaunt is perhaps one of the most terrifying places ever penned in literature. And who best to pen it? Of course, Stephen King. Hey, listen, I'm not bothered if we have the King of Horror show up twice on our list. In fact, I'm honoured. But for those of you that have read his 1981 short story, you may understand exactly why we have to put this place at the top of the pile. First published in the Twilight Zone magazine and later added to his 1985 collection Skeleton Crew, this is perhaps one of King's most explicitly science fiction entries. The Jaunt, which is a short enough read, is a tale that takes place in the early 24th century, where the technology of teleportation, referred to as jaunting, is entirely commonplace and is used for instantaneous transportation across enormous distances, where humanity is now pretty much colonized our entire solar system. Now, I'll try my utmost not to ruin any of the actual bones of the story, which solely features a young family about to jaunt their way to Mars, but it's in the exposition of this place that truly takes you off guard. You see, the Jaunt is the place that you must pass through in order to be a recipient of this instantaneous teleportation, and thus travel such immense distances. But as the pioneers in the early days of this technology quickly discovered, a traveller has to be completely unconscious to survive the jaunt effect, as is explained by the family's father as they prepare to undergo general anaesthesia at the beginning of the story. Alright, I'll stop there because really if you haven't read it, I'm sure that there's a PDF floating around somewhere for you to sink your teeth into, but honestly, I'm not sure if it's just me, but King seemed to have struck on an oddly specific nerve here. Maybe the jaunt is Todash darkness, maybe it's the place that we see when we close our eyes and go to sleep at night. But one thing is for certain, I don't ever want to find out. Kicking off at number 5, The Labyrinth. Because when we're talking about hell and the underworld, Clive Barker's interpretation of demons to some, angels to others is a completely different kettle of fish, where all manners of body horrors and dimensional demonic entities find themselves in an equally terrifying house and home, which is aptly named Hell, or the more structurally appropriate, The Labyrinth. First penned in Barker's 1986 novella The Hellbound Heart, and later expanded upon in the Scarlet Gospels, as well as the film and graphic novel series that followed. In Barker's world, his demonic Cenobites reside eternally in an unholy and evil realm of limitless pain or pleasure, if you're into that kind of thing. In its natural state, hell takes on the form of the dark, winding labyrinth most commonly visualized in the graphic series, but it also has the power to take on any shape or state depending on the amassed pleasures or pains of the souls that are contained within it. Now, because of that, it has widely been speculated and somewhat confirmed by Barker that this is definitely not the Abrahamic version of hell, but instead an extra dimension. In essence, the labyrinth is some form of permeable realm that can be perceived as heaven or hell by whoever is trapped inside. It's led some to believe that the labyrinth itself represents the true nature of the human mind and all of the infinite possibilities that reside within the cracks of reality. And you know, that's also not really accounting for the fact that it's ruled over by the eternal evil Leviathan, a creature of ancient chaos that perpetually levitates at the geographical center of the labyrinth, watching over his hellish kingdom, raising towering sky-blotting monoliths to glorify his dominion over the Cenobites and mankind. I mean, for the most part, despite being one of the most hellish depictions of hell itself, you can't deny that Barker created an incredibly interesting landscape for horror fiction. Coming in at number 4, Dantes Inferno. Because if we're talking about hell, then finally we can mention the resounding work of classic literature, the 14th century epic poem that made up the first part of Dante's Divine Comedy, one of the most important works in the whole of canonical literature, and the allegorical progenitor of pretty much every hellish realm ever written after that. Also, this particular point goes out to the steadfast dedication of our top 5 scary viewer, Spencer Beard. Although we can't do an entire top 5 list of Dante's punishments, we can definitely condense them into one. So yeah, there we have it. Thanks. Now, as many of you will already know, Dante's depiction of hell is the archetype that laid the foundation for the vast majority of horror fiction, although it may not be as apparent as you may think. In the poem that begins on the evening of Maundy Thursday, the narrator, Dante himself, finds himself lost in a dark, dark wood, and after being nearly ravaged to death by 3 beasts, a leopard, a lion, and a wolf, he's rescued by the ghost of the Roman poet Virgil, who leads him through the gates of the underworld to begin a journey of the very fabric of the Abrahamic religion. And of course, what better place to begin than with hell? In Dante's Inferno, hell is depicted as 9 concentric circles of eternal pain and torment, located deep within the bowels of the earth. These consist of limbo, lust, gluttony, greed, wrath, heresy, violence, fraud, and treachery, each of them dedicated to facilitating astutely specific and horrifying torments to bind any hateful soul for eternal punishment. Perhaps the worst of these is the Malbolge, the 8th circle of hell that consists of the 10 Bolges, a series of deep ditches where fraudsters, grifters, and thieves alike are dismembered and disemboweled over and over for eternity by a host of demons. Yeah, it's a pretty nasty place. Next up at number 3, Arachus. Because talking about nasty and equally inhospitable places, Frank Herbert's fascinating and terrifying desert planet of Arachus that makes up the homeworld of his fantastic sci-fi epic novel Dune is perhaps its own version of hell for those not willing to adapt to the relentless trials and torments that lurk deep within it. For those of you that haven't read Frank Herbert's Dune saga, please do, although they are pretty lengthy books, so I'll forgive you if you choose to watch David Lynch's 1984 film instead, because they're both great, although the books are better. The fact of the matter is though, when it comes to Arachus, there's a lot to get through, so I'll try and condense things as much as possible. As laid out in the Dune saga, the planet of Arachus is a desert wasteland battered eternally by scorching heat and a dry, arid climate where pretty much nothing can live or grow, save for a few hardy species of mice. Oh, and yeah, of course, a population of giant freaking sandworms that live deep within the planet's surface, erupting out of the desert wasteland to destroy anything and everything whenever they feel like it. You might be thinking, well, why would anyone ever want to go to Arachus then? And well, that's because the planet itself is the most valuable planet in the cosmos, and at the beginning of the saga, it is the only place in the Juniverse that produces spice, an incredibly powerful resource that powers spaceflight, and whoever controls the spice controls the destiny of mankind, and thus begins the eternal struggle and chaotic political espionage that is Frank Herbert's Dune saga. Because although we've somewhat touched on the geographical horrors that lie within Arachus, we haven't even gotten close to how damn violent and dangerous living on this planet would be if you somehow found yourself as a character in the novel, especially if your last name is Atreides and your first name just so happens to be Paul. Yeah, sometimes it doesn't matter what material terrors are lurking within a fictional world, because if you fill it with enough villains, assassins and bloodthirsty berserkers, it kind of just writes itself. Swinging in at number 2, Caramora. And truth be told, we couldn't really do this list without somewhere mentioning the grim darkness of the Warhammer 40k universe, and although there are more nightmarish worlds and dimensions of pure chaos that make up the fictional realm, perhaps the most terrifying of them all is the dark city of Caramora, the vile, obscene and impossibly evil home of the Dark Eldar. In the Warhammer universe, the city itself is said to be impossible for any outsiders to find, and it is widely believed to be hidden deep within the interdimensional labyrinth of the Webway, a corrupted version spreading out across the cosmic chaos like a virus. Because of that, Caramora is a city of impossible creation, linked together by shimmering dimensional shortcuts, portals that are scattered throughout the galaxy, sometimes light years apart, but bound together by the chaos of the Dark Eldar's corruption. I mean, Caramora is such an evil place that even the shadows that slink through the city have a habit of consuming its inhabitants. Not like it matters either, as Camora's population is estimated to be more than most star systems and is considered to be bigger than even mankind's largest hive cities combined. And it's also important to note that the population is comprised of some of the most evil, treacherous and violent individuals in the entire Warhammer universe. Trillions of them, all condensed into one sprawling viral city, and truth be told, Caramora puts to shame pretty much every other den of evil in fiction. Mordor can move over, forget about Azkaban or any of its ilk. In fact, when Ben Kenobi told Luke Skywalker that he couldn't find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy than Mos Eisley, he obviously had never visited Caramora. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, the Dreamlands. Because, of course, we cannot talk of terrifying places in literature without paying homage to Lovecraft's most complete and horrifying dimensions, the Dreamlands. The fact of the matter is, we could probably make an entire list out of Lovecraft's bizarre and terror-inducing alien planets, but it's in the extra-dimensional impossibility of the landscape that he described in his Dream Cycle where the horror that we all share lies. Because what could be more terrifying than a realm that we could all potentially access, in theory anyway? First noted in his 1918 short story Polaris, and as described in perhaps his most complete novella, The Dream Quest of Unknown Cath, Lovecraft went on to fully flesh out the Dreamlands in a series of short stories written between 1918 and 1932, portraying entire cities of moon beasts, man-eating spiders, vast plateaus of satyr men that worship toad priests, and castles of ancient design perched upon mountains of black rock. The thing is, like with many of Lovecraft's cosmic horror, it comes with the magnitude of not knowing where this land begins and where it ends. The Dreamlands could be infinite, and as Randolph Carter discovered in The Dream Quest of Unknown Cath, the terrifying extent to this place is limited only by the human imagination. Oh, and also not only that, but of course, nowhere is safe from the outer gods, not even human consciousness, because the crawling chaos himself, Nyarlathotep, holds dominion over the Dreamlands, slowly pulling the strings and puppeteering his way across the realm, corrupting dreamers and lost souls alike, as well as the unfortunate races that populate its bizarre and impossible landscape. Essentially, the Dreamlands is Lewis Carroll's Wonderland, except instead of slipping through a looking glass or falling down a rabbit's warren, you could accidentally find yourself in this place during a bad dream, and then become addicted to the mysteries and infinite curiosity of its design, and before you know it, you're a dream junkie searching for Cath like Randolph Carter. Yeah, if you couldn't tell, this place is messed up. Kicking off at number 5, Agartha. And whilst being a close nominee to our friendly resident top 5 scary witch, Agatha, who is on hiatus at the moment and will return when she so well pleases, this particular entry, although close in subject matter, is a completely different sort of esotericism. You see, for hundreds of years, particularly following the emergence of the occult renaissance in the late 19th century, Western theology and philosophy had a habit of taking fragments of cultures from ancient times and places and adding them to to their own. This one, Agartha, is an amalgamation of all of those things. Also known as Agarthi or Agartha, Agartha is a legendary kingdom said to be located deep within the Earth's core, and in the field of esotericism, it is a name widely associated with the belief of a hollow Earth. Now, although the veracity of that particular belief is, well, full of holes, excuse the pun, its impact on the folklore of the Western world throughout the 18th and 19th century is pretty staggering. The hollow Earth belief is most often associated with the 17th century astronomer Edmund Halley, and was built upon the esoteric beliefs left behind in Greek, Celtic and Hindu mythologies, amongst many others, of an ancient subterranean cave system that leads to a long-forgotten civilization. In the 19th century, a prolific French occultist by the name of Alexandre Saint-Yves d'Alvidère published the first reliable account of Agartha in European society. And by reliable, well, that means his methods were otherwise undisclosed. Nevertheless, though, according to him, the secret long-forgotten world of Agartha, along with all of its wisdom and wealth, would be accessible for all of mankind when Christianity finally lived up to the commandments which were once drafted by Moses. He would later elaborate by stating Agartha could only be accessed once the anarchy of human civilization was replaced by the synarchy of the harmonious rule, a belief of cooperation that was proliferated by a secret elite throughout mid-century France, Italy, China, Mexico and Hong Kong. In other instances, Agartha is commonly associated or confused, depending on your stance, with Shambhala, otherwise referred to as Shangri-La. And because of this, in general, Theosophists regard the Agartha of legend as a vast underground complex of caves beneath Tibet. In that regard, I guess the search continues. The Kingdom of Sagune. And as so far as the colonization of North America is concerned, this tale is a remarkable example of the time. It's also just straight up awesome, and it's living proof of the influence that oral tradition can have given which perspective it comes from. The Kingdom of Sagune, as legend tells it, reportedly has its origins in an ancient Iroquoian legend and was recorded by the French colonists during the colonization of North America throughout the 16th and 17th centuries. Now, the purpose of this legend may well have been a cunning one, laid out for the native Iroquois to give the French pause, but as they told it, the Kingdom of Sagune was a land far to the northern regions of Canada, a vast and capable kingdom of blonde men rich with gold and furs. Now, the legendary explorer Jacques Cartier first described finding what he referred to as the Saguenay River on his second voyage to the north in 1536. He was accompanied by a number of Chief Donnaconnor's sons who told him of the kingdom. They claimed to him that the Kingdom of Sagune was rich with great mines of silver and gold, and yet the French explorers that followed their directions searched in vain. Now, in hindsight, it is most likely that the Kingdom of Sagune was either entirely mythical or instead an Iroquoian attempt to trick and confuse the French. However, there are some that have since speculated that the Kingdom of Sagune was an ancient pre-Columbian settlement, most often referred to as Los Humedos, a place which we've spoken about regularly here at Top 5 Scary Videos. Now, do with that information as you will, but also note that the kingdom is also regularly associated with the legendary settlement of Norumbega, meaning quiet place between the rapids in the spoken Algonquian languages. Both of these refer to an ancient kingdom of pillars of gold where the inhabitants carried quartz of pearl atop their heads. Now, whilst none of this is for certain, thanks to its place in folklore, it certainly still raises quite a few questions. Next up at number 3, Gorias, Phineas, Murias and Phalias. And whilst we're technically cheating by putting 4 places of myth and legend into one single point in this regard, we definitely can't be having any of them without the other. Also, this particular entry is just awesome, so yeah, there's that too. Now, if you know anything about the mythological cycle of Ireland or the most iconic mythological races found in their literature, the Tuatha De Danann, then you'll also know that there are 4 incredibly important treasures often associated with its core belief. Otherwise known as the 4 treasures of the Tuatha De Danann, allegedly bought by the Tuatha De Danann from their 4 island cities of Murias, Phalias, Gorias and Phineas. Together, these 4 treasures form perhaps the most important objects in Ireland's mythology. The Stone of Fal, the Spear of Lug, the Sword of Nuada and the Cauldron of Dagda. And if that sounds like some recipe for the most badass figure in all of mythology and folklore, then I suppose it is. And if you could find each and every one of them by travelling to these 4 mythical islands, then I'm pretty sure you become pretty capable indeed. As the Libor Gabala describes, the Tuatha Dé Danann resided in the northern islands of the world, where during their early days as a people, they were instructed in the arts of magic before finally moving in dark clouds to what is now Connacht in Ireland. They carried with them from their 4 beautiful cities on 4 beautiful islands, Gorias in the east, Phineas in the south, Murias in the west, and Phalias in the north. The Tuatha Dé Danann were said to have lived for a time untold on each of their islands, embracing these magical arts, druidry, knowledge, prophecy, and magic. Each of these islands were said to have had their own patron poet, otherwise known as a Fili, who was an enlightened figure remarkably skilled in the occult arts. What is most intriguing though is that the 4 islands are most often associated with a place known as Lochlan, which in the tongue of many Gaelic languages refers to Scandinavia, or more specifically Norway. And as an awesome side note, the 4 magical objects are also widely associated with the ancient Welsh legend of the 13 treasures of the island of Britain. And if you're looking for a tall tale that will stir your spirit and sense of adventure, just take a look at that because it's brilliant. Coming in at number 2, Scholomance. And yes, for the World of Warcraft fans amongst you, I did just say Scholomance, as in yes, it's a real place, in folklore and fable anyway. And much like the same Scholomance that exists in the western plaguelands of the eastern kingdoms of Azeroth, this particular school of black magic and the dark arts was particularly good at training young necromancers to do the devil's bidding. Of course, in legend anyway. In this instance though, Scholomance was a fabled school of black magic that resided in Transylvania for time forgotten, a place that was allegedly run by the devil himself in many Romanian folkloric accounts. As the legend tells it, throughout its history the school enrolled about 10 students at a time to become the Solomonari, although only one of the 10 graduates would be chosen by the devil himself to become the Weathermaker, incredibly powerful wizards in Romanian folklore that ride dragons and control the weather, causing rainstorms, thunder and hail and all manners of things. As they say, the school of Scholomance itself lay deep underground, and the students which attended it remained confined deep within the bowels of the earth, unexposed to sunlight for the 7-year duration of their study. Here they learned the language of all living things, the secrets of both nature and magic. They would speak to animals, weave spells and recount the entire knowledge of humanity into the book of the Solmonari. If they did that, then they were free to graduate as wizards of the world, powerful figures that would weave folklore for ages to come. Now, although it's entirely unclear where Scholomance truly resided in folklore legend, there are some estimations. Many accounts refer to Scholomance being south of Hermannstad, which is now known as the city of Sibiu in modern Romania. Oh, and also, of course, Scholomance was a stark inspiration for Bram Stoker himself in his Dracula novel, using the school of folklore legend as a basis for his Castle Dracula deep within the Carpathian Mountains. Who knows, maybe one day you'll get an invitation to study there, if you're lucky. And finally, coming in at number 1 spot, Avalon. Of course, because just as El Dorado made its way to the number 1 spot on our previous list, there are just some places in folklore legend that are so out of reach that it is human nature to endlessly long for their existence. Take for example Avalon, perhaps the most legendary and important place in Arthurian legend, the Isle of Apple Trees, the place where King Arthur's sword of Excalibur was forged, and then later, tragically, where Arthur himself was taken to recover from his wounds following the Battle of Camlan and his showdown of epic proportions against Mordred. The name itself first appeared in recorded history in Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain, and the details that follow it are more illuminating than you may expect, actually. In fact, Avalon in literature is far more associated with the magic and mysticism of a different kind. As Monmouth penned, Avalon was ruled over by Morgan Le Fay, the powerful enchantress of Arthurian legend, as the chief of her 9 sisters: Morano, Mazo, Glitton, Glittonea, Glitton, Tirono, Thitton and Thiton. As Monmouth described, voyaging to Avalon required a lengthy journey by sea, but it was worth it considering the bounty that awaited you. The island of apples, Avalon, or the Fortunate Isle in its Latin tongue, derived its name from the fact that it produces all things by itself. As the legend tells it, its fields have no need for the ploughs of farmers, as nature provides in abundance. The island produces grain and grapes, and the apple trees of the wood grow tall from the close-clipped grass. Those that live there have lived there for 100 years or more, and the 9 sisters rule it by a pleasing set of rules. In this legend, the otherwise duplicitous Morgan Le Fay is instead a remarkable figure rather than the evil seen in later literature, and she rules Avalon as a place that the ladies live and know all of the magic in the world. In some instances, to shield Avalon from conquering eyes, she covered the island in an all-encompassing mist, where it is said to have existed in secrecy ever since. Perhaps most interestingly though is Avalon's historical connection to Glastonbury Tor, a place which in ancient Britain was a high hill surrounded by fenland and marsh, which is said to have been often shrouded in mist and ruled over by a noblewoman named Morgan, who sheltered King Arthur following the bloodthirsty Battle of Camlan. Folklore, eh? Isn't it the best? Kicking off at number 5, Bingan City. And for our first entry, we're heading over to the northern Samar province of the Philippines, where for hundreds of years, local legend and whisperings of folklore have spoken about a place that seemingly doesn't exist within our dimension, but is instead a portal to another realm where the supernatural encantos, the enchanted supernatural beings of Filipino myth and legend, reside. Some refer to this mysterious place as the Black City or the Invisible City, but in the language of Waray, the local tongue of northern Samar, the literal translation of this place is where one finds the lost. Geographically speaking, the actual location of this mysterious place is considered by many to be pretty definitive, and Bingan City allegedly exists in a location off the coast of Gandara, Tarangnan and Pangsanghan in the murky depths of the North Pacific Ocean. In fact, not only that, but a number of people have actually claimed to have seen this city, which only ever appears at night in a strange array of bright glowing energy. Many sailors have claimed to have seen a dazzling city of light appearing in the distance on moonless nights, only shimmering in the distance, if only for a few brief moments. They describe it as a dark, beautiful city with high-rise towering buildings equipped with some strange advanced technology. In fact, several years ago there were numerous reports of a Japanese mining company capturing satellite images of a series of brightly lit islands off the coast of northern Samar, who believed it to be rich deposits of gold and uranium. Obviously, as mining companies are apt to do, they began work immediately, setting up a large worksite in the town of San Jorge, sending boats out to the location where their satellite images had captured the lights. Strangely enough though, the town of San Jorge and the mining company were soon plagued with a series of mysterious accidents and mishaps, and within mere weeks the company was forced to shut down the operation in fear of bankruptcy. Now, I'm not saying what they found was definitively evidence of Bingan City, but I'm also not saying that because it's pretty interesting, right? Swinging in at number 4, Kesh. And this particular bastion of folklore is equal parts awesome and equal parts something straight out of a fantasy novel. As the legend tells it, beneath the waters of Lake Svetloya of Nizhny Novgorod Oblast in central Russia resides a town of unimaginable ingenuity that has remained undiscovered ever since its creation sometime in the year 1200 AD. And that's down to the fact that the invisible town of Kesh has an uncanny habit of submerging beneath the waters of Lake Svetloya at will. Yeah, isn't folklore awesome? As the legend goes, in the early 13th century, the Grand Prince of Vladimir Yuri II built a town known as Mali Kesh, or Little Kesh, on the banks of the Volga River. Later on, after the town found great success and fortune, Yuri decided to cross the other rivers that flowed from the banks of the Volga, where he found an even more beautiful spot on the shores of Lake Svetloya. According to Russian folklore, that's where Yuri decided to build a town even greater than Little Kesh, where he named this one Bolshoy Kesh, or Big Kesh. Soon after its construction, the two towns of Kesh became a place of such immense success that they drew the attention of the Golden Horde, the Mongol army under the leadership of Batu Khan that had already conquered vast portions of the Russian lands. As the legend goes, the Mongols quickly captured and ransacked Little Kesh, forcing Yuri II to retreat back through the hidden passages of the woods to Bolshoy Kesh. The Golden Horde quickly found him though, sheltering in the town on the shores of Lake Svetloya, but as soon as the army approached the town, they found no fortifications, just a bunch of villagers in the square on their knees praying. Thinking they quickly got the upper hand, the Golden Horde charged at them, but suddenly countless fountains of water burst from beneath the ground as the army were washed back, witnessing the town of Kesh submerge itself fully into the lake before disappearing entirely. Some say that still to this day you can still hear the chiming of bells and people singing from beneath the waters of Lake Svetloya. Russian Atlantis? Who knew? Next up at number 3, High Brazil. And for this one in particular, we're heading over to a mystical, magical realm that allegedly existed off the western coast of Ireland, a breathtaking place of immense natural beauty and also home to some of the most awesome instances of folklore going. Although this one is perhaps a somewhat lesser known location of local legend and is shrouded in mysteries of both the physical and the metaphysical. And also no, not Brazil as in the very real place that exists in South America. In In fact, the actual etymology of Brissil or High Brissil is relatively uncertain, but is thought to have come from the Irish word Wee Brisail, which means descendants of the clan Brisail, one of the ancient clans of Ireland. As the legend tells it, High Brissil is a phantom island that is said to lie somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. An Irish myth describes it as a place cloaked in mist that appears for only one day every 7 years. Despite that though, strangely enough, the island itself appeared on a number of nautical maps dating as far back as 1325, and up until the late 1800s was considered to be very much a real place. So much so, in fact, that in 1480 expeditions for the island of High Brissil set out from Bristol, where, although the historical records are murky, a captain known as John Cabot was noted as actually discovering the place. A few hundred years later, in 1674, a Captain John Nisbet claimed to have seen the island whilst travelling on a voyage between France and Ireland, stating in his personal records that the island of High Brissil was a bizarre place populated by large black rabbits and a lonesome magician who lived in a tall stone castle. He claimed to have glimpsed the island just off the coast of the Isles of Arran. In fact, talk of the island of High Brissil became so widespread in folklore afterwards that it was considered by many to be the other Atlantis, evidence of a long-forgotten sunken empire that resided in the deep waters of the Atlantic Ocean. Again, strangely enough, in 1862, High Brissil was considered to have been identified as the Porcupine Bank by the Geological Society of Ireland, a series of cold water reefs that appeared 200 miles from the coast of Western Ireland. Many consider the reefs to be evidence that the sunken island of High Brissil was once a very, very real place. What do you guys think? Coming in at number 2, Dinas Emmeris. And for this one, we're staying firmly in the British Isles with perhaps one of the most mystical and magical places in the equally magical realm of Wales, a place of such ancient mystery steeped in folklore traditions and Celtic mythologies that there's quite a few places to choose from when it comes to the mysterious places of folklore. But this one, Dinas Emmeris, is perhaps the most incredible, and also, strangely enough, perhaps the only entry on this list that has the archaeological credibility to back it up. That's a bold claim, right? But let me explain. As the legend goes, the warlord Vortigern, king of the Britons, fled into Wales to escape the Anglo-Saxon invaders sometime in the 5th century. Expecting some bloodthirsty battle, he chose a lofty hill fort to defend his royal retreat that resided in a rocky and wooded hill near Gwynedd in northwest Wales. Every day, Vortigern's men worked their fingers to the bone trying to erect the first stone tower of the fort, but the next morning they would find their work crumbled and collapsed in a heap. This continued for weeks on end to no avail, and in a final act of desperation, Vortigern was advised to seek the aid of a young boy that lived in the woods. A young boy not conceived by a mortal man, and after sending his soldiers out into the Welsh valleys, eventually they found him. His name was Mridin Emrys, who you may also know by his other name, Merlin Ambrosius, as in, yes, that Merlin of Arthurian legend. Now, the young Merlin quickly diagnosed the king's dilemma and informed him that beneath the mountain were two verms or dragons, one white and one red, one that represented the Saxons and fought for them, but would soon be defeated by the Red Dragon of Wales. While Vortigern wasn't the wisest of kings and ignored Merlin's advice, which quickly led to his downfall, but Welsh legend believed that the Red Dragon remained at the fort, which after Vortigern's downfall was constructed to near perfection following Merlin's design. Strangely enough though, in 1954-1956, two excavations of the alleged site of Dinas Emmeris were undertaken, and researchers were surprised to discover that not only were the foundations of the alleged fortifications found, but that they carbon dated to pretty much the precise time that Vortigern ruled in Britain. Yeah, this place is pretty magical in more ways than one. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, El Dorado. Because we can't talk about mysterious places without giving an allusion to one of the most renowned locations in the murky mysteries of humankind, El Dorado, the City of Gold. A place that was once considered to be a man, a mythological tribal chief of the Muisca people, whose legend then morphed into a city, then to a kingdom, and then finally an empire of pure gold and riches untold. Although it was considered to be disseminated across South America by mere whispers, countless rumors that have since morphed into an unreachable legend as the Spanish conquistadors plundered their way through Colombia, Venezuela, and portions of northern Brazil. There is no denying the fact that El Dorado is the holy grail when it comes to mythology, folklore, and the relentless pursuit of human adventure. Throughout history, the concept of El Dorado has undergone several transformations, eventually being combined with the mythologies of several legendary lost cities, many of which may be entirely true. However, perhaps the strangest part of the El Dorado legend is that there may already be credible evidence to at least its existence. Although it was dismissed entirely in the 19th century as a myth, the legend has been tied to Lake Perim, a place that allegedly became the gateway to the Golden City, but was since closed off to prying adventurers. Strangely enough though, evidence of the existence of Lake Perim was discovered in 1977. Researchers discovered watermarks of an ancient lake along the surrounding hillsides where Lake Perim was considered to be, and geological studies corroborated the fact that 700 years prior, in 1690, a massive earthquake had opened up a huge bedrock fault where the lake should have been, forming a rift that caused the lake to disappear completely. I mean, that sounds like a pretty convincing way to lose the entrance to a vast golden city, right? Well, unless it's been discovered already. Who knows? Kicking off at number 5, the Severn Valley. And believe it or not, this one hits a little close to home for me, given the fact that, well, the River Severn is very much a real river in England, and I grew up not so far from the actual Severn Valley. Yeah, that might explain a few things. Forget about that for a moment though, because what we're concerned with is the Severn Valley of the Cthulhu mythos. And just like how Lovecraft himself had his own fictional county with Arkham in New England, so too did one of the brilliant later writers of cosmic horror, Ramsay Campbell. Although in the real world, the Severn Valley is primarily in Wales and the West Midlands, this version of Campbell country lies roughly between the cities of Gloucester and Bristol, and much like Arkham, it's home to some pretty terrifying pit stops. You see, just like how Arkham has the Miskatonic University, the Severn Valley has Brichester University, albeit much more mundane, but home to the manky cracks in the fabric of reality. Perhaps the most terrifying place in the Severn Valley undoubtedly is the Goat's Wood, and if you're familiar with Shub Niggurath, aka the Black Goat of the Woods with 1,000 young, then you'll know that the Goat's Wood is a place that you certainly wouldn't want to stumble toward after a few nightcaps by the River Severn. First described in the Moon Lens, the Goat's Wood at first glance is merely an isolated town in the middle of a dense forest, close set, dull red roofs, narrow streets, encircling forests that all seem somehow furtive, as if they're hiding something that just shouldn't be. And that's before you'd meet the residents of the town though, the locals of the Goat's Wood, described by Campbell as being revoltingly goat-like, resembling a medieval woodcut of a satyr clad in grotesquely voluminous garments, endlessly worshipping their perverse fertility deity, the All-Mother, the Black Goat of the Woods. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it for a day trip, really. Swinging in at number 4, the Nameless City. And despite being pretty damn vague, the Nameless City is actually one of the most fully formed locations in the Lovecraft mythos. Go figure, right? Because once again, ambiguity reigns supreme. First appearing in Lovecraft's 1921 short story of the same name, the Nameless City is an ancient ruin roughly located somewhere in the vast expansive deserts of the Arabian Peninsula. Its origin is mired in ancient mystery, but it is certainly older than any human civilization. In ancient times, it was said that the Nameless City was built and inhabited by an unnamed race of reptiles with a body roughly shaped like a hybrid between a crocodile and a seal, with a strange head common to neither and a set of bizarre horns atop an alligator-like jaw. Yeah, sounds pretty gross, right? Well, even stranger still, these creatures moved by crawling on their bellies, and so the architecture of the Nameless City are endless rows of incredibly low ceilings. Now, how would a race of belly-crawling crocodiles build the capital city of an ancient civilization? Yeah, welcome to Cosmic Horror. As is explained in the Necronomicon by the notorious mad poet Abdul al-Hazred, the Nameless City is the place that he dreamt of on the night before he sang his unexplained couplet. That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange eons even death may die. You see, part of this terrifying intrigue to the Nameless City is the concept of a long-lost alien race far more powerful and far more intelligent than mankind ever could be. The theme itself would go on to inspire countless cosmic horror and sci-fi authors who took the concept of an impossible antiquity and left it for bewildered human explorers to discover. The Nameless City in many ways exemplifies the entire point of cosmic horror, the evidence of something far more powerful than our civilization could ever be, even if it is a set of ancient ruins buried deep in the middle of a forgotten desert. Next up at number 3, Unknown Cath. And yeah, of course, and while with this entry I am pretty much including the whole of the Dreamlands as detailed in Lovecraft's 1927 novel The Dream Quest of Unknown Cath, the final destination of the whole horrifying tour is the ancient city of Cath, home of the dream gods of the mortal plane, the Great Ones. You see, as Randolph Carter himself found out throughout Lovecraft's novel, the precise location of the city that he dreamt of, Cath, is entirely uncertain in the universe, and there is a dense confusion as to whether it exists in the dream world of the Dreamlands or indeed in the waking world, or even further still, in a bizarre mixture of both. You see, in our previous video we spoke about the strange interspatial properties of many Lovecraftian locations, particularly with the incomprehensible plateau of Leng. It is also strongly suggested throughout many other examples of Lovecraft's fiction that Cath is actually located beyond the Antarctic plateau that appears in At the Mountains of Madness. And yeah, whilst many people called for that location to appear on this list, it has already, twice. Plateau of Leng, Cath, it's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. it's anyone's guess really. The thing is though, despite the eternal uncertainty as to where this ancient city actually is, with its bizarre massive pillars of stone, it is discovered by Randolph Carter at the end of the novel. After his trek into the cold wastes and his passing through the ancient ruins of Sarcommand, Carter ultimately ends his journey at Cath and the abode of the gods. And guess what? He finds it empty, nothing, barren, desolate, abandoned, not the city that he dreamt of as a child, just a husk of nothingness. But then a strange pharaoh-like man appears from the distance, leading a massive procession of the inhabitants of the Dreamlands. And guess what? It's Nyarlathotep. And what does he do to Randolph Carter? After all of that, he tells him a lie, slaps him on a massive bird, and sends him flying through time and space toward the court of Azathoth. Now, I'm not sure about you, but Lovecraft didn't have a very optimistic outlook on impossible dreams. It's sad really. Coming in at number 2, Nakai. And this may well be one of my favourite places in the whole of Lovecraftian fiction, mainly because it's perhaps the most metal place in the whole of the ancient cavernous city of Yoth, which we'll maybe touch on in a later video, but yeah. Put it this way, Yoth is already a terrifying enough place, and in that regard, Nakai is the most popular joint in town. Also known as the Black Realm, the Gulf of Nakai, the Black Abyss, the Gulfs of Nether Horror, Nakai first garnered mention in Lovecraft's 1931 novella The Whisperer in Darkness. It is described as a vast, lightless cavern below Yoth. It is home to the Great Old One Sasogua, which we'll get onto in a moment, and is whispered to be a place of lightless, inky seas in which the unspeakable race of Shoggoths roll and splash hideously. As detailed in The Whisper in Darkness, there are openings which human beings know nothing of, some of them in these very Vermont hills, great worlds of unknown life down there, blue-lit in Kenyai, red-lit in Yoth, and black, lightless Nakai. The thing is though, it's heavily alluded to that Nakai is far, far older than both Yoth and Kenyai, and that they were both built upon by these surviving races of ancient civilizations, almost like looking at the rings in some impossibly old tree. It is said that Nakai was discovered in turn after eons by each extinct civilization, and because of that, Nakai is right at the bottom of them all. And perhaps the reason for that is that the Great Old One himself, Sasogua, has made this place his home for all eternity. The amorphous toad-like god creature first mentioned in the Narcotic manuscripts and the Necronomicon. It is said that in the centre of Nakai there is a squat plain temple of black basalt blocks without a single carving and containing only a vacant onyx pedestal. It was built to house a very terrible black toad idol, that of the toad which had always been there at the bottom of the endless depths of the Black Realm. Just a temple of darkness and the toad. And finally, coming in at number 1 spot, Azathoth's Core. And we did briefly mention this in our number 3 entry, where the unfortunate Randolph Carter was strapped to a canterbird by Nyarlathotep himself and ushered forward to Azathoth's Court at the centre of the universe. Fortunately for him, he woke up from his metaphysical dream before any of that could come to fruition, but if he would have arrived at his destination, yeah, our minds cannot even comprehend the eternal torment that would have befallen him. As noted in the dream quest of unknown Kadath, outside the ordered universe is that amorphous blight of nethermost confusion which blasphemes and bubbles at the centre of all infinity, the home of boundless demon sultan Azathoth. Here it is said that unlighted chambers beyond time and space exist amidst the muffled, maddening beating of vile drums and the thin, monotonous whine of accursed flutes. Yeah, it's always flutes, right? What is it with cosmic horror and flutes? Hey, we may never know. The point is though, in many ways the Court of Azathoth is both the end game and the origin of cosmic horror. If we take the mythologies laid out by Lovecraft as gospel, then the Court of Azathoth, outside of existence as we know it, is where it all began. And for any human being to ever even comprehend the physicalities of this place, their mind would collapse and splinter into infinitesimal fragments of nothingness. You see, there can be no definite description of the blind idiot god himself because every glimpsed vision of him is perceived differently and his existence is constantly shifting and changing. However, in the Cthulhu mythos there is some evidence that the physical manifestation of Azathoth and his court is directly in the centre of our galaxy, a place otherwise known as Sagittarius A star, the supermassive black hole at the centre of the Milky Way. And yeah, fiction aside, there is a supermassive black hole at the centre of the Milky Way known as Sagittarius A star. Is it Azathoth's Court? I'm saying nothing. Kicking off at number 5, Innsmouth. And yes, of course, our first destination on this whistle-stop tour of Lovecraftian fiction has to be the one place that you surely wouldn't want to spend your summer holiday in, well, unless you were looking for that particular Innsmouth look. Of course, the small town of Innsmouth, Massachusetts. Now, before we see what all the fuss is about, it's probably best that we briefly talk about a little place called Lovecraft Country, because it's going to pop up a few times here and there. As some of you may know, within his fictional works, H.P. Lovecraft created a small area of New England that featured recurrently in his many tales of cosmic horror, oftentimes bleak, East Coast, Atlantic towns and villages, sleepy suburbs that harboured some deep, dark and downright dank secrets. One of those places is Innsmouth, a coastal town founded way back in 1643, famed for its otherwise fishy disposition. You see, as the primary backdrop of Lovecraft's 1931 novella The Shadow over Innsmouth, the story's narrator Robert Olmsted quickly discovered that the strange denizens of the town were in fact members of the cult of Dagon and had kept an ancient pact with the horrifying keepers of Dagon, the Deep Ones, fish-like horrifying monstrosities. As part of their pact with the Deep Ones, the residents of Innsmouth were forced to interbreed with them, creating a long line of rather fishy-looking individuals. And not only that, as is also revealed later in the novella, those of Deep One heritage eventually fully transform into their fishy ancestors and flee to a place called Devil's Reef, just off the coast of Innsmouth, where the ancient city of Yanath-Lele resides. Yeah, it's safe to say that if your date tells you they're actually from Innsmouth, it's probably best to not order the sea bass and just walk away. Swinging in at number 4, Arkham. And again, a place that I'm sure many of you expected to appear on this list, and a name that many of you will be familiar with, even if you're not as up to date with the many places and names of Lovecraftian fiction. Yeah, I'm looking at you. Arkham Asylum. What a great game. Anyway, as we said previously, Lovecraft Country is perhaps the most densely populated and also widely unfortunate places in the Lovecraft universe. With Innsmouth, Dunwich, Kingsport and Providence, it's safe to say that all of them merely linger in the shadow of the misty town known as Arkham, Massachusetts. As Lovecraft described in The Thing on the Doorstep, the ancient, mouldering and subtly fearsome town in which we live, witch-cursed, legend-haunted Arkham, whose huddled, sagging gambrel roofs and crumbling Georgian balustrades brood out the centuries beside the darkly muttering Miskatonic. I mean, Lovecraft often gets a bit of stick for his lack of technical prose, but what an awesome sentence that is. The fact is, Lovecraft, as well as August Derleth and many other Cthulhu Mythos writers, had such a high reverence for Arkham. It was a place crafted with a love for cosmic horror, and also a place that featured more often than any others in their works. Herbert West Reanimator, The Colour Out of Space, The Whisperer in Darkness, The Dreams in the Witch House, The Shadow Out of Time, and many others, all either feature Arkham or make a note of its shadowy reputation. And of course, as you'll all be waiting with bated breath for me to mention, it is home to the notorious Miskatonic University, the home of the largest collection of arcane literature and tomes of the occult known to mankind. It says something that the many professors that form Lovecraft's protagonists were primarily the faculty of Miskatonic University. Getting a job there, or even living in Arkham for that matter, was quite the occupational hazard. Next up at number 3, the Plateau of Leng. And now we're getting into perhaps the more genuinely terrifying landscapes of Lovecraftian fiction, where space and time cease to function in all manners that we understand. Now, if we're being honest, there are countless places alluded to in the Cthulhu mythos, perhaps a sentence here and there in reference to its horrifying mysteries, but none of them are as fleshed out as the Plateau of Leng is, which is an impressive feat given the fact that it's actually never been fully described. Yeah, I know, but that's just cosmic horror for you, I guess. As it first appeared in 1922's The Hound, Leng is a cold and arid plateau, whose location seemingly varies entirely depending on who is observing it. In The Hound, the Necronomicon details that its location actually resides in Central Asia, and it is inhabited by a human corpse-eating cult. Seemingly, the notorious scholar Abdul al-Zared describes it as a place where different realities converge, which could perhaps explain why its precise location can never be pinned down. Again, in 1926, The Dream Quest of Unknown Cath, the Plateau of Leng is said to be located in the north of the Dreamlands, and strangely enough, it is residence of the High Priest not to be described, a mysterious figure who dwells alone in a strange prehistoric monastery to the Great Old Ones, accompanied by a race of vile, goatish humanoids. Yeah, and if it doesn't sound like a nice place, that's because it really isn't. In fact, it is also believed that in the legendary novella At the Mountains of Madness, the expedition featured in that particular tale who discovers an ancient abandoned city of impossible dimension created by the Elder Things is in fact a manifestation of the Plateau plateau of Leng, a crossover of the ancient places of the Cthulhu mythos emerging from the fabric of twisted time and space. Yeah, essentially if you end up on the plateau of Leng, you're probably in for a bit of a terrifying ruckus, I guess. Coming in at number 2, R'lyeh. Come on guys, you only knew it was a matter of time, because in his house at R'lyeh, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming. And if we're talking about abandoned cities of impossible dimension and terrifying architecture, then we need only take a quick glance at the sunken city to realise just exactly what Lovecraft's intention was. Because it's crazy that we can even elaborate on this, but the reality is old Howard Phillips made architecture scary. He really did, and we can only admire what an impressive feat that really is. First appearing in Lovecraft's 1928 short story The Call of Cthulhu, R'lyeh is a sunken city located deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, a treacherous place characterized by its bizarre architecture of non-Euclidean geometry, and of course the place where the Great Old One, the High Priest himself, Cthulhu, waits dreaming. As Lovecraft first describes, the nightmare corpse city of R'lyeh was built in measureless eons behind history by the vast, loathsome shapes that seep down from the dark stars. There lay Great Cthulhu and his hordes, hidden in green slimy vaults until the end. Again, the man knew just exactly how to turn pillars of stone into looming behemoths of a place that our frail human minds could never fully comprehend. Now, if you haven't read The Call of Cthulhu, then please dive into it because it's a fantastic read, but as is described in that story, Lovecraft details R'lyeh as a city of panorama, vast angles of stone surfaces, too great to belong to anything right and proper for this earth. He calls it abnormal, impious, and filled to the brim of horrible images. Although no one has ever been there, Lovecraft makes a point that navigating the city on foot is nearly impossible. Surfaces that appear flat may be tilted, angles of masonry that appear convex at first glance will shift and change to appear concave. Nothing is as it seems, and R'lyeh is a place that was never intended to be witnessed by human beings. Yeah, take note, if you're trying to write a terrifying location, this is a whole different level. And finally, coming in at number 1 spot, Carcosa. Of course, because although a place not primarily created by Lovecraft himself, when it comes to cosmic horror, there are fewer places in the terrifying cosmos that strike such unimaginable fear in the hearts of us weary humans as that of Carcosa. And again, much like with the Plateau of Leng, this place has never been truly comprehended in the many texts of the Cthulhu mythos. And let's not beat about the bush, that's the reason why it's truly terrifying, right? Because if there was some kind of revelation that Carcosa was in fact the home of a race of cute, fluffy, bear-like Ewoks, we wouldn't be scared in the slightest. You see, that could be true, that could be the case, but the fact that we don't know and the fact that we will never know is why our curiosity is piqued and is why we are fearful of it. It is the literal definition of cosmic horror, the fear of the unknown. First mentioned in the 1886 short story by Ambrose Bierce, an inhabitant of Carcosa, the ancient and mysterious city is barely described and is only ever viewed in hindsight following its alleged destruction by the narrator who once lived there. The city would later be picked up and used more extensively in the Robert W. Chambers book The King in Yellow, although the mysterious allusion to its location or even its origin was still its primary function. Chambers gave us just enough information about Carcosa to keep our intrigue piqued, and in fact that has been the same fuel that has kept the mystery of Carcosa in our cultural memory for so long. No other place in literature has been passed from pillar to post, from author to author, so often as Carcosa. In The King in Yellow, the city of Carcosa is a mysterious, ancient and impossibly cursed place. One description of its location is said to be located on the shores of the Lake of Harley, deep within the Hyades star cluster. Where's that? Beats me, but I'm pretty confident that we should all avoid it. As the Cthulhu mythos has later elaborated upon, it is believed that Carcosa is the residence of the Great Old One, Hastur, who often merges the reality of Earth with his home dimension of Carcosa, seemingly plucking humans out of thin air like apples on a tree to be his tortured playthings. Yeah. Carcosa, it literally goes without saying, but it's a pretty terrifying place. Kicking off at number 5, the True Knot. And while some of you may be scratching your head slightly at this entry given the superseding events of the end of Stephen King's fantastic novel and sequel to The Shining, 2013's Doctor Sleep, I'm pretty certain that the properties of these terrifying psychics are the definition of this list. And why? Because really, this steam-hungry organisation of vampiric psychics have obviously been scheming their way across the United States, if not the entire planet, ever since Jack Torrance went nuclear at the Overlook Hotel. And also, if we approach this from the assumption that all of King's work of fiction are connected via the Dark Tower, then the True Knot, from a meta perspective, are one of literature's most well-kept secret societies. Let me try and explain. Throughout the events of King's 2013 sequel, Dr. Sleep describes a group of nomadic psychics roaming the country in RVs and caravans that feed off the life force of spiritually gifted children, and now adult Danny Torrance being one of their intended victims. These gifted children, who demonstrate the shining seen in King's first novel, exude a life force that they refer to as steam, which when consumed keeps them young and extends their lifespan beyond its natural limit. Yeah, sounds like the perfect recipe for some immortal secret society, right? And it is. As their creed throughout the novel explains, we are the chosen ones, we are the fortunate ones, we are the true knot, and we endure. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure that's a checklist for what constitutes a secret society. Also, no spoilers because Dr. Sleep is awesome, and if you're not in the business of reading the novel, the film is out at the end of this month, so yeah, no excuse. Oh no, is it the end of next month? Next month. Swinging in at number 4, Spectre. Whoa. Curveball. I bet you guys didn't expect to see James Bond slink his way onto this list, but we're not so much concerned with the man who killed the man with the golden gun, but more so his most devious of adversaries, the secret, shadowy organisation known only as Spectre. In many ways, again, this is the definition of a secret society, an organisation of individuals on an international scale whose sole motive is to, well, who knows what their sole motivation is, but several things are certain. They make a boatload of money, they're straight up evil, and they're also incredibly stylish. I don't know about you, but what is it with evil, villainous organisations and extravagant architecture? We'll never know. Spectre, which forms the acronym for Special Executive for Counterintelligence, Terrorism, Revenge and Extortion, is the definitive overarching villainous body of Ian Fleming's legendary James Bond series. And who better to lead them into chaos than the evil genius and supervillain Ernst Stavro Blofeld. Yes, the guy in the swivel chair with the monocle and the Persian cat. And yes, the guy that's been parodied by pretty much every crime comedy ever. But that's not the point, because at the start, he was awesome and terrifying, and I don't care what you think. First appearing in the 1961 novel Thunderball, Spectre would see many incarnations through Fleming's series, whilst always maintaining their malevolent aim of seemingly perfectly tempered chaos. Seemingly though, the most telling of their motivations was purely a personal one. It seems that the definitive supervillain Blofeld himself created one of the most intricate and evil organisations in literature simply because he had a grudge. Next up at number 3, the Esoteric Order of Dagon. And I'm pretty certain that some of you are waiting for this entry, and truth be told, we cannot do this list without including this particular sect of scheming fishmen. In many ways, the Esoteric Order of Dagon is the quintessential secret society, particularly if we're including the ones that have a giant eldritch deity at the heart of their traditions. Yeah, a bizarre set of handshakes don't look so weird when compared to a bizarre set of handshakes with tentacles. Now that's a good question. Is a handshake still a handshake if it's with a tentacle? Let me know. You see, as so brilliantly designed in Lovecraft's 1931 novella The Shadow over Innsmouth, the Esoteric Order of Dagon were the ocean-worshipping secret society founded by the bizarre and gill-ridden Captain Obed Marsh. You see, as Captain Marsh found on his journey across the Seven Seas, there are ancient things that lurk in the water. After learning a ritual from the inhabitants of an unnamed Polynesian island on how to summon the Deep Ones, he took this newfound knowledge back to the town of Innsmouth, where he then summoned them and entered an eternal pact. It was a two-way relationship at first. The inhabitants of the town would have a constant supply of fresh fish, and the townspeople would have to offer them human sacrifices. Bit of a bum deal, if you're asking me. Obviously, as time went on, this bizarre pact eventually led to the 3 oaths of secrecy, the final one being a human pledge to sire or bear a Deep One child, perpetuating the fishy Father Dagon worshipping race. Although they were technically destroyed, I'm pretty sure Lovecraftian fiction left this one open-ended. I'm looking at you, New Orleans. Coming in at number 2, the Talamasca. Okay, now we're really getting into the heavyweight champion of literary secret societies, because seriously, move over, Illuminati. This is a cause for some concern. The Talamasca would like to have a word with you. Now, hopefully, if you've read Anne Rice's brilliant vampire series, or even had your interest piqued by the 1994 film starring Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, then you'll know that beneath the comings and goings of our civilization exists a much older, a much more permanent race of creatures, vampires. And of course, being a sort of secret society in themselves, it goes without saying that the secret societies of a secret society are pretty damn secretive. And this is what I was irking toward with that opening statement of this list. It's important not to know these things when faced with the mysteries of literature. The Talamasca caste, sometimes known as the Order of the Talamasca or simply Talamasca, are a secret society set up during the early days of mankind with the sole purpose of keeping track of the paranormal comings and goings of the denizens of Earth. I mean, it goes without saying, really, you wouldn't really let them sit there seething with impossible power for thousands of years, right? Witches, spirits, werewolves, and of course, vampires all fall within the ever-gazing eye of the Talamasca. You see, in an expert fashion, Rice leaves just enough breadcrumbs of this organisation throughout her work, and as they claim in Queen of the Damned, we watch and we are always there. In several cases, it is even alluded to that the Talamasca have existed as an entity since before the birth of Christ, with their origin strangely and even more perplexingly being tied to bees. Yeah, you heard that right, and your guess is as good as mine. Maybe we'll find out what's going on with the bees. Hopefully. And finally, coming in at number 1 spot, the Emir. Guys, I'm sorry, but if it seems like I'm harping on about the Kingkiller Chronicles, that's because I am. And if you haven't got the message yet, read this remarkable series and let your mind work overtime in trying to figure out just what the hell is going on. You see, Patrick Rothfuss, the creator of the Kingkiller Chronicles, demonstrated in both his first novel, The Name of the Wind, and his second, The Wise Man's Fear, a pretty remarkable knack of only giving us shapes of a story and leaving us to attempt to figure out the truth behind them. Again, I've mentioned it before, but part of the true charm of this series are the possibilities behind its many twisting tales. We're never truly given definitive answers, only illusions, and the most mysterious of those grand illusions are the Holy Order of the Emir. And you know what? In many ways, this is one of the only true secret societies in literature that we could put on this list, because the truth is, we know nothing about them. It's pure speculation as to how the Emir came to be, who they are, and what their motivations were. We do know some things about them though, which is a testament to how well woven this story is. The Emir were founded by the Tellin Church in the early days of the ancient Aturan Empire. Their sole purpose was for the specially selected members to be equal part knight-errant, a roaming purveyor of justice, and a vigilante. Inexplicitly, they were exempt from the law, and their role was to enact their judiciary powers across the land for the greater good. The highest of their ranks, the Siridae, were denoted by their tattooed hands depicting the Emir's symbol, a flaming tower. You see, the whole point of this series is the pursuit of knowledge, the seeking of a secret, and hopefully one day we'll find out just exactly who the Emir are.